Britain does seaside rather well. Victorian piers stretch into grey waters. Promenades are lined with pastel beach huts. Fish and chips wrapped in paper, eaten on benches overlooking the tide. The very word seaside conjures something golden in the British imagination. Childhood holidays with bucket and spade, donkey rides along the sand. The promise of candy floss and sea air drew generations of families to these coastal towns. But some seaside towns never quite captured that magic. Or they captured it once and watched it slip away like the retreating tide. Welcome back to the channel. If you are new here, I explore the places and stories that shape modern Britain. Do consider subscribing and sharing your thoughts in the comments below. Your observations from these communities mean more than any government report. Now, let us begin our journey along the British coastline. Scattered around these shores are places where the for sale signs stay up too long. Streets where shop fronts have been boarded for years. Communities where locals speak of better times in the past tense and exchange knowing glances when newcomers mention moving in. I have spent considerable time examining the 2025 English indices of multiple deprivation, Welsh Government data, coastal town analyses, and community testimonies to bring you the seaside towns that statistics suggest are struggling most. Some face problems decades in the making, some were simply forgotten when the holiday trade moved abroad. All deserve to be understood rather than dismissed. Let us begin where the government data points most starkly, a village on the Essex coast that was never meant to be permanent. Jaywick sits near Clacton-on-Sea, a small community of around 900 residents spread across streets with optimistic names like Brooklands and Grasslands. Drive through on a summer afternoon and you might see beach huts and bungalows, seagulls wheeling overhead, children playing in gardens. Look closer and the picture changes entirely. Jaywick has been named the most deprived neighbourhood in England for the fourth consecutive time. According to 2025 figures, the village ranks within the most deprived 10% on all 7 domains that the government measures: income, employment, education, health, crime, housing and living environment. Jaywick fails on every single count. The statistics tell a stark story. According to the Citizens Advice Bureau, 40% of residents are unable to work due to disability or long-term illness. Walk past the bungalows and you will see mobility scooters parked outside, walking frames by front doors. A community where ill health has become the norm rather than the exception. 60% of pupils at Frobisher Primary School on the edge of the village receive free school meals. That is nearly 2/3 of children starting each day without breakfast provided at home. The village was never meant to house families year-round. It was constructed in the 1930s as a holiday resort for Londoners escaping the city. The land was originally fields and salt marsh unsuitable for agriculture. An entrepreneur named Frank Stedman purchased it in 1928 to build low-cost affordable holiday homes for working-class families. Plotlands, they called them. Cheap chalets built on marshy ground without proper foundations or drainage. Families would come down for summer weekends, breathe the sea air, then return to their real homes in the city. But after the Second World War, a shortage of housing meant the properties became permanently inhabited despite not being built for year-round living. Holiday chalets became family addresses. Temporary structures became homes passed down through generations. The foundations that were adequate for summer weekends began to crumble under constant use. Jaywick received international coverage in 2018 after it was used in an American election campaign advertisement. Bleak images of unpaved roads and dilapidated homes broadcast across the Atlantic as an example of what happens when communities are forgotten. That same year, the village received an even more extraordinary visitor, the United Nations Special Rapporteur for Extreme Poverty, who arrived as part of a fact-finding mission. Speaking to the BBC recently, local resident Christopher Thompson, aged 60, offered a more complicated picture. He acknowledged that Jaywick is deprived and needs investment. He said, "There is nothing here for the kids. Empty streets, boarded up shops, few prospects for the young." But then he added something that challenges the simple narrative of decline. "The community is amazing," he said. "Amazing people down here. They all help each other out." Last year, Tendring District Council agreed a £126 million 20-year improvement plan for Jaywick. Whether that investment arrives in time remains to be seen. The people living there cannot wait another 2 decades. Travelling up the coast and across to the northwest, we find Britain's most famous seaside resort hiding some of its most troubled streets. Blackpool, the tower rising above the promenade, the illuminations drawing millions each autumn, the pleasure beach with its roller coasters and arcades, stag parties and hen do's filling the pubs on summer weekends. This is the image that Blackpool sells to the world. What the brochures do not mention is that Blackpool is the most deprived local authority in England, ranked first out of 153 local authorities, the highest deprivation score possible. Neighbourhoods in Blackpool account for 7 of the 10 most deprived areas in the entire country. Not 7 of the most deprived in Lancashire, 7 of the most deprived in England. Behind every illumination there is shadow. The inner wards tell a different story from the Golden Mile where tourists take photographs. Drug-related deaths in Blackpool are the highest within England. Walk through certain streets after dark and you will see the evidence. Figures huddled in doorways, discarded needles in alleyways, the desperate and the forgotten congregating where the tourist lights do not reach. Alcohol use as a reason for hospital admission ranks second highest in the country. The pubs that draw the stag parties also draw those drinking to forget. The health statistics are devastating. 4 Blackpool wards have the lowest life expectancy in the country at 66.6 years. The national average is 82.3 years. That is a gap of nearly 16 years. A person born in the wrong part of Blackpool can expect to die a decade and a half earlier than someone born in a prosperous suburb elsewhere. Same country, same National Health Service. Vastly different outcomes. Crime figures paint an equally concerning picture. Blackpool recorded an overall crime rate of 206.2 per 1,000 residents in the 12 months ending December 2025. The national average is 91.6, more than double. Walking through Blackpool, you are statistically twice as likely to encounter crime as walking through the average British town. Yet local voices push back against the statistics. One resident told the local newspaper that yes, there are some really deprived areas that need investment. A lot of housing needs knocking down and rebuilding from scratch. But they added that it is easy to knock Blackpool. There is a lot of good going on here. They said they feel winded when these reports come out. The statistics are real, so is the community pride. Cross the border into Wales, and the pattern continues along the North Wales coast. Rhyl once drew holidaymakers from Liverpool and Manchester. Guest houses lined the seafront, and the fun fair brought families each summer. The town had the feel of a proper British resort, modest but beloved by those who returned year after year. Today, Rhyl appears 4 times in the top 10 most deprived areas in Wales. 4 separate neighbourhoods in this single town rank among the most struggling in the nation. Rhyl West 2 tops the list entirely. The most deprived place in Wales is a few streets back from the seafront of a town that once promised seaside joy. The deprivation runs deep. Multiple factors combine in West and Southwest Rhyl to create what officials call deep-rooted deprivation. Those factors include worklessness, low incomes, health inequality, and poor educational outcomes. These are not temporary problems that might improve with a good summer season. They are structural failures, decades in the making. Crime rates reflect the desperation. Police recorded criminal damage rates and violent crime rates in Rhyl West 2 are both the second highest in Wales. Burglary rates in Rhyl West 1 are the 6th highest. Walk these streets at night and you will see the anxiety on residents' faces, the careful checking of locks, the reluctance to open doors to strangers. A board called Our Royal has been formed, backed by £20 million in United Kingdom government funding to help regenerate the town. Local representatives speak of hope and renewal, but the statistics keep arriving each year, showing the same neighbourhoods in the same desperate condition. Regeneration funding comes and goes. The deprivation remains. Before we continue further along the coast, we must understand the broader pattern emerging across Britain's seaside communities. The Office for National Statistics investigated the economic situation in 169 coastal towns in England and Wales. Their findings were stark. 114 of those 169 towns suffer from high deprivation. That is 2/3 of all coastal communities classified as struggling. Along England's east coast, the picture is even worse. 39 of 46 coastal towns fell into the high deprivation category. In northwest England, 16 of 21 did as well. From 2009 to 2018, 50% of coastal towns saw a decline in employment. Among larger seaside towns, the figure rises to 51%. Jobs are disappearing from these communities faster than from inland areas. The seasonal nature of tourism means work vanishes each autumn and may not return each spring. Young people are leaving to find jobs and training elsewhere. The retired are moving in, seeking cheaper housing and sea views. In Skegness and Mablethorpe, more than 30% of patients registered with a general practitioner are over 65. The national figure is 18%. These towns are ageing rapidly as the young flee and the elderly arrive seeking affordable retirement. One academic who studies coastal decline calls this pattern the England salt fringe. It is analogous to the American Rust Belt, a process of deindustrialization and social decline affecting towns on every English coastline. From Hastings on the south coast to Clacton on the east and Weston-super-Mare on the west, the geography of abandonment follows the shoreline. Continuing southward, we reach the East Sussex coast and a town that exemplifies this national crisis. Hastings appears among the most deprived areas in the 2025 data. The government report specifically names it alongside Blackpool and Hartlepool as an area of concentrated coastal deprivation. Over 40% of neighbourhoods in Hastings fall within the 20% most deprived in England. Nearly half the town is classified as struggling. One neighbourhood in Hastings ranks among the 10 most deprived in the entire country. This is not relative deprivation. This is absolute crisis measured against national standards. Child poverty runs high. Over a quarter of children under 16 live in low-income families. Walk past the schools at home time and you see children in worn uniforms, shoes held together with tape. These are visible markers of families struggling to provide basics. Unemployment among young people is particularly stark. Hastings has the highest percentage of individuals aged 18 to 24 claiming unemployment benefits in all of Sussex, nearly 9%, more than twice the regional average. Young people finishing school face a future with few prospects. No wonder so many leave. The link between health and poverty is clear in the local data. 75% of all out-of-work benefits claimants have health-related conditions. 69% of homeless households involve people with health problems. Illness and poverty feed each other in a cycle that is difficult to break. Across to Kent, we find another tale of regeneration promised and deprivation persistent. Margate has become a national model for arts-led regeneration. The Turner Contemporary Gallery opened on the seafront. Artists and creative types moved in seeking cheap studio space. Weekend supplements featured the town renaissance. Property programs showed young professionals buying Victorian houses. Yet Margate remains dogged by acute deprivation. Despite the investment, 3 areas of the town are among the poorest neighbourhoods in the country. Just 2 areas across all of England rank among the most deprived 10% on all 7 deprivation domains. One is in Jaywick, the other is in Margate. The art galleries and vintage shops exist alongside streets where families cannot afford to heat their homes. 1 in 4 shops in nearby Ramsgate stood empty in December 2024. More than 70 neighbourhoods across Kent now fall inside England's most deprived 10%. That figure is up from 51 in 2019. The problem is growing, not shrinking. Drug deaths cast a shadow over the regeneration story. Thanet is the 9th highest place in the country for deaths related to heroin and morphine. Behind the Instagram photographs of sunsets over the harbour, people are dying in bedsits from addiction that found fertile ground in poverty and despair. Further up the east coast, we reach the Lincolnshire shore. Skegness has a particular claim in the deprivation statistics. Analysis of 57 seaside destinations ranked Skegness as the most deprived resort of all. It is ahead of Blackpool and ahead of Clacton, the most deprived holiday destination in Britain. East Lindsey district, which covers the Skegness coastline, has one of the highest rates of antidepressant prescription in the country. The chemist shops do steady business in medication for despair. Male life expectancy here is 10.3 years shorter than in wealthier areas of Lincolnshire. For women, the gap is 7.2 years. Geography is destiny. Your postcode predicts your lifespan. More than 80% of residents along this part of the coast live in areas categorised among the 20% most deprived nationally. Around a third have no or low educational qualifications. The schools feed children into a job market with few opportunities. Those who gain qualifications leave for cities where prospects exist. Great Yarmouth on the Norfolk coast tells a similar story. 1/3 of the most deprived neighbourhoods in the country cluster in just 10 local authority districts. Great Yarmouth is one of them. Council reports acknowledge that the borough risks being left behind. Local deprivation, compared to other areas, has been increasing for several years. The gap is widening, not closing. The tourist offer here centres on low-budget attractions. Caravan parks stretch along the coast. Amusement arcades with flashing lights and grabber machines line the promenades. These attractions have limited economic benefit for local residents. The jobs are seasonal and paid at or near the minimum wage. Most of the profits flow to owners based elsewhere. Back in the northwest, we find Morecambe facing the Irish Sea. Few places illustrate this crisis as starkly as parts of Morecambe. The town once bustled with holiday makers from the Lancashire mill towns. Guest houses lined the promenade. The Winter Gardens hosted variety shows. This was once known as the best end of town. Today, the same area ranks 34th highest out of nearly 35,000 neighbourhoods in England deprivation indices. The best end has become one of the worst. The decline of the holiday industry left behind redundant hotels and boarding houses. Owners converted them into cheap multi-occupancy housing of an inadequate standard. Rooms were divided and divided again. Families were crammed into spaces designed for holiday couples. Damp grew on the walls. Heating barely worked. Landlords extracted rent from those with no other options. The town became a magnet for the urban poor, drawn from inland towns like Blackburn, Preston and Burnley. These shifts created areas with intense concentrations of unemployment, debt, poverty and despair. When housing is cheap enough, people will tolerate conditions they would reject elsewhere. Morecambe offered affordability and little else. Why do seaside towns suffer so consistently across the country? The housing market plays a central role. Places like Blackpool and Morecambe face a particular problem. Former hotels and boarding houses were sold to developers and converted into cheap bedsits. These act as a magnet for people down on their luck from the surrounding region. The housing stock designed for tourism becomes housing of last resort for the desperate. Seaside towns attract highly vulnerable populations. People coming out of prison seeking somewhere to start again. Individuals fleeing domestic violence who need cheap accommodation quickly. Those struggling with substance abuse and mental ill health, drawn to places where nobody asks too many questions. The towns absorb these vulnerable people without the resources to support them. Chronic low pay affects coastal resorts because so much employment is in the worst affected sectors. Care work and hospitality dominate the local economies. The average wage in Blackpool is 1/3 below the national figure. You can work full-time and still qualify for benefits. Employment offers no escape from poverty. Transport links trap these communities in isolation. Towns like Skegness and Minehead have poor connections to anywhere else. Their peripheral position halves economic opportunities. Investment goes to better connected places. Businesses locate where transport is easier. The seaside towns are passed over again and again. Successive governments have failed to recognise that seaside resorts represent a unique challenge. The problems are specific to these places. The solutions require specific interventions. Instead, coastal towns receive generic regeneration funding that fails to address their particular circumstances. The money arrives with fanfare and disappears without lasting change. The statistics confirm that deprivation is deepening, not improving. The Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government found that 82% of neighbourhoods classified as most deprived in 2025 were already in that category in 2019. The same places appear on the lists year after year. Some areas have seen dramatic shifts in the wrong direction, with communities falling through the cracks faster than anyone expected. Alison McGovern, the Minister for Local Government and Homelessness, called the 2025 statistics a damning indictment of a system that has left some communities broken. She acknowledged that previous policies had barely begun to break the cycle of deprivation. The admission was honest. The solutions remain unclear. At the heart of their predicament is a cruel dilemma. Seaside towns serve as both trap and refuge. They trap those born there with few opportunities to escape. They offer refuge to those fleeing problems elsewhere who bring their difficulties with them. These twin forces interact in countless ways that undermine efforts to reverse decline. So there you have it. Seaside towns across Britain where something has gone deeply wrong. Communities that once promised summer joy now appearing on deprivation indices and crime statistics. Holiday destinations that became housing of last resort. Resorts that drew millions of visitors now struggling to attract investment of any kind. These places exist whether we acknowledge them or not. The promenades still stretch along the shore. The piers still reach into grey waters. The beach huts still line the seafront in faded pastel colours. But behind the familiar imagery are communities trapped in cycles of decline that have persisted for decades. The people who remain in these seaside towns deserve more than our curiosity. They deserve investment, attention, and the same opportunities afforded to those lucky enough to be born in postcodes that do not carry warnings. They deserve recognition that their struggles are not personal failures, but consequences of structural abandonment. They deserve government policies designed for their specific circumstances rather than generic solutions that fail to address the particular challenges of coastal life. If you have visited any of these places, or if you live in a seaside town that carries its own struggles, I want to hear from you. Comments from people who actually live with these realities teach us more than any official report. Tell me what I got right. Tell me what I missed. Tell me about the streets in your own coastal community where the challenges are real, but so is the determination to build something better. The statistics measure decline. They cannot measure the community spirit that persists despite everything. The neighbours who help each other, the volunteers running food banks, the residents who refuse to abandon the places they call home even when the numbers suggest they should. These stories matter. The places are real. The people are our neighbours. The seaside belongs to all of us. What happens to these towns reflects who we are as a nation. Please watch the video appearing on your screen next, and do not forget to subscribe.